Good day, everyone. Today is Thursday, April the 15th. It's 10 a.m. here on the West Coast. I'm Martin Gagel with Research. Today, we're welcome Vitalhub, VHI, on the Venture Exchange, consolidator of IT systems and emerging SaaS player in the healthcare space. We've got Dan Matlow, CEO, and Brian Goffenberg, CFO, joining us here today. Firstly, Dan, why don't you give us an overview on the company?
Yeah, let me take you through the presentation today, and I'll start off with just a bit of overview of the presentation and hand things over to Brian, after that to go through that. Welcome everyone, and just bear with us, and then hopefully Martin will ask us some good questions, and we'll try to get everything through for everyone on what we're about today. But as Martin suggested, Vitalhub is focused on the health and human services-based marketplace, the healthcare based sector marketplace, and we to date have grown through a combination of what we think sizable organic growth of recurring revenue on a SaaS-based business model. Our SaaS revenue is about 75% of our overall revenue to date. And we've also grown through a synergistic M&A based strategy through buying assets and on an international scale. So we're pretty large as an aggregator in the European, UK-based marketplace, as well as the Canadian marketplace. But those are the two areas of our business. Both of them are equally as important to us, and we continue to focus on both those areas. So we're a high organic, growth business focused on M&A with the strong financial position with high margins, EBITDA, with what we call strong recurring revenue, which is what we call ACV, which is the contract value, which is a very important metric to us. We're focused on two areas in the healthcare area. So it's pretty pinpointed areas that we're looking to grow in. And those are being in the community, agency, mental health space. And the other area, but we call what we target as operation, patient flow, and visibility-based sector. So we're looking for acquisitions and solutions in both of those areas, with the patient flow area being where we're doing. A great board, a great management team, and we'll take you through what we're doing to do that. We also have a large offshore development group in Colombo, Sri Lanka. So about 1/3 of our staff is based offshore, which is a really important part of our strategy for cost efficiencies, for technology building and saving in terms of there to do it. And as I mentioned, we're internationally based with customers throughout Canada, UK, some in the US, some in Australia, some in the European marketplaces, and some in the Mideast. So European markets is important to that. So a little bit about my background: 30+ years of experience in the industry, focused all on healthcare IT. Previous to this, I was president, CEO, and founder of a company called MedWorks, which was publicly traded. And MedWorks went from 2005 to 2014. It was sold off to private equity and went public in 2008. So we've been in the public market since 2008, and we sold to Vista Equity Partners in 2015. So a track record of doing things. Brian, who joins us today, as well, 30 years of experience, multiple CFO roles in numerous companies. He was previously the CFO at MedWorks as well. Lots of years of experience with venture capital companies. Mike Sanders, who's the CEO of the UK group, 30+ years of experience in that group, and he has lots of experience in that sector. And Vijay Kumara is our head of our development group. He also was the founder of the Colombo Sri Lankan group. Although he's Canadian and has moved back to Canada, he was in that area. Robert Lazar has 20+ years of experience in professional services, and Neil Stothing heads up our sales and marketing group with over 20 years of experience in that. So large experience in healthcare IT for many years of experience. The board, which I've, my background back for, some of you may know Francis Shen, who's one of the originators of a company called Offshore Technologies, that grew through M&A in the telco space. He's on our board. He's also a significant investor. He also chairs our M&A committee. Chris Starr, who recently became the chairman of the board, has been on Bay Street lots of different years, many different public-based organizations. Roger Dent, who's been portfolio manager, many different portfolios, been on Bay Street for a long time. Currently the portfolio manager for a fund called Quinsam Opportunities. Barry Tissenbaum heads up our audit committee. He was former chair at Noranda. And Steve Garrington, who's our international representative, former senior exec, many different healthcare IT, but a company called InterSystems, which is a billion-dollar company, and he's based out of Australia and Europe. So what do we do? So we have solutions in two areas, which we call the patient flow, operational visit, and the community mental health space. 70% of the company to this point is in the patient flow and operational visibility space, focused on two areas of solutions. One which we call patient journey-based solutions, and one which we call in operational visibility, which are used by the provider solutions. Provider solutions are used by the actual healthcare organization themselves, and they're used by organizations to give them analytics and to use tools that help them move patients more effectively through the patient-based journey within the hospitals. And the second area, what we call patient journey solutions, are tools that are actually used by the patients to help them navigate using their mobile device and their computers to help them through community. So things like pre-assessments prior to coming in for an elective surgery based solution, appointment setting using your phone, helping you guide you through to the appropriate area within a hospital, usually using a kiosk or a phone based solutions to do it. So those type of solutions, virtual, and they're used virtually on your phone to communicate with people instead of going face to face. The provider solutions are more data analytics based solutions to do that. But we have about 30 different solutions in those areas. In the community mental health platform, we have a product called Treat EHR, which is the integration of all of our medical record-based solutions. So we've used Treat as the main solution, which is a complete client or patient-based medical record, electronic health record, which is very predominant in community mental health agencies in Ontario and Eastern Canada, and very big in those regional initiatives, and continues to win large transactions in those areas. Do it. The company has gone through acquisitions. So it started in 2016 through a small little acquisition of Vitalhub, which was private, and then went public through CPC-based element. In 17 and 18, we started buying products in the community mental health space. Hynex is the biggest one we bought with a company called B Sharp, which had the offshore development group. Hynex had the product called Treat, which we've integrated into all the rest of the solutions. And we combined two other small companies called Roxy and Clarity into the group at that time. We have closed a large transaction at the end of 18, early 19 with the province of Nova Scotia, which will represent about $2 million worth of recurring revenue, $2.5 million of recurring, sorry, but that when it's fully deployed, we're only recognizing $500,000 of $500,000 of that right now, of the $2.5 million in our annual contract value of what that. So our total, the company, just as a thumbnail for you, is about a $22, $23 million a year company with the last acquisition, which we just announced this week. And from a recurring basis is about 17 million. Is starting to get into the the 17 million range in terms of actual recurring based revenue. So we do have starting to go there, and it's a large percentage of our recurring revenue streams. Next slide. We entered the patient flow operation and visibility space with an acquisition we did in 2019 of Oak Group, which is a product called MCAP, which is in the provider-based space, which gives hospitals the ability to use clinical decision support tools to evaluate the appropriateness of a patient in a care setting. So, as we're going through COVID right now, a big portion is hospitals being crowded. Which patients should be in hospitals, which ones shouldn't be in terms of being crowded. We provide data to those hospitals that says these patients are inappropriate for the setting. They can be taken out safely and put into other settings. Oculus is a decision support analytics-based solution. It was bought as a Waterloo-based company. Oak Group was based in the UK. Oculus was a Waterloo-based company, which has analytics for providers that helps them see where their patients are. So if you look at all the big boards and the big screens within hospitals, we do things like emergency wait times, surgery wait times, see who is in surgery. All those analytic and feeds would come off of the Oculus-based platforms. And then in the end of 2020, we completed 2 acquisitions of a company, In Touch with Health. Those are what In Touch with Health has been growing pretty rapidly because of its patient journey solutions. It has solutions that help patients navigate into hospitals. So if you can appreciate during COVID, the ability to get into a hospital is restricted, and they don't want patients in there unless they need to be for elective-based things or clinics So we start communicating with patients, and we do as much as we can at home before they come into hospital. And InTouch has all those solutions. In Transforming Systems has data analytic feed-based systems that come off of variable systems and on a healthcare regional perspective. What I mean by that, it's not specific where one hospital is looking for data as Oculus would be. It would aggregate data from multiple hospitals, multiple facilities to give regional views. So if you can imagine, the entire Southern Ontario can see one snapshot, how many beds are full of COVID, how many of them beds are full, what type of beds are available, what can they do. So it is used in many parts of Ontario during this COVID-based response pretty extensively. So, you know, those are the type of systems that would be used by Transforming. And Transforming is UK-based with about 30% of the UK marketplace on that platform, and it continues to grow. And we're moving that product in Canada pretty effectively as well. Mental health stuff, as I said, is all built on the Treat product. It's about 1/3 of our revenue. It's all based on the Treat product, and it's a mental health electronic healthcare record. It's also the solution that was sold to Nova Scotia. So that large transaction in Nova Scotia, which we think will lead to many more provincial transactions, is the Treat-based software that comes from it. As I mentioned before, patient flow operations visibility is there. We've had 20% organic growth since June of 2020. At the end of Q4, we were 14.8 million of recurring revenue in total. What was in the company, with 70% of that coming from the patient flow and operational visibility space. The pandemic has led to lots of different solutions being in there, and we've recognized that about a $2 billion marketplace for those solutions. Just samples on some of the solutions. As I said, we have about many of those would be like emergency room wait time based solutions, Stay Track, which are boards within a hospital to help you with communication. The Shrewd product is the transition, housekeeping based applications, which would help determine when beds need to be cleaned. Operations to help them put them into beds are some of those solutions. And you know, on the other side, we would have like pre-assessment based solutions with Synopsis IQ or Synopsis at Home, which has won lots of awards in the UK for helping you with assessment based before you come into hospital. We do virtual clinics. We'll do things like iReceptionist. So before you come into hospital, we'll be the receptionist that you get on your phone before you go. Wait time managers communicates with them before they get into a hospital, how long they're going to have to wait for procedures, what the clock says as it's going into that. So all those different small based, nugget based solutions that we provide. Again, that we looked at the market, about a 3 million bed market across the countries that we're working in. It's about a $2.1 billion marketplace that we're looking at. And a little bit on the M&A strategy. We're pretty good capital allocators. So far, we've bought 9 different companies, including the original Vitalhub. We've raised about 55 million in capital since inception. We're still sitting on, you know, about 25 million of that capital to do that. And we think we've been pretty good capital allocators to do it. So we reduced R&D spend pretty dramatically in our acquisitions with our Colombo Sri Lankan based group. We consolidate in many different areas in G&A and marketing. We optimize sales and marketing, and we look at all the strategies. Are these solutions going to help us sell organically? We want to be able to grow those solutions across cross-selling our customer base as well as cross-selling into other markets. So we look at all those things. We've identified 400 companies. We reduce costs. We are looking to be a 20 to 30% EBITDA-based company. We're at that level right now of adjusted EBITDA. So adjusted EBITDA is our most important number. We have a large amortization goodwill number on our balance sheet that we need to eat through. So we think adjusted EBITDA makes sense. We've been buying companies in 1 to 12 million in Canadian revenue. We've been using a combination of cash and stock, although it's been much more cash lately than stock as we've progressed, and we've had the ability to do that, which gives us a competitive advantage. And we've purchased companies. We've been buying between 1 and 2.5 times revenues, 3 times recurring revenue, and we continue to do that. We always look for at least 60% recurring. We get the companies break even or profitable right after inception and then work on getting them profitable. We look for significant customer bases with limited retention issues, ability to expand, and the ability to upsell those clients, as I mentioned before. Go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
So revenues, as Dan said, we consider ourselves both an M&A play and we want to grow the businesses organically. We've been operating healthcare IT companies for a number of years, and we believe we've got a pretty strong team to be able to do that. So how we measure the organic revenues are we take anything over and above what we purchased. So we purchased a company which had $1 million of recurring, and we sold 1.5 million in a quarter. That 500K would be organic, and the balance would be purchased. So typically we've gone from anything from as low as 29% to as high as 53% of our revenues have been organic, and we'll continue to see this trend of organic. We'll see it grow in dollar value, maybe not as a percentage value as the business grows. A big key metric for us is recurring revenues. We want to de-risk the business as much as we can and get as much recurring revenue as possible. As Dan said, on acquisition front, we look for companies with at least 60% recurring revenues. We're at the moment, we're probably trending at about 75 to 80% recurring revenues, and we want to keep this trend going upwards. It's a key metric for us. We look at, from a operating point of view, we like to look at the adjusted EBITDA. And why? Because there are two really big items that flow through our income statement. One is our people cost, and the other one is the amortization of intangibles. Through acquisitions, we end up writing up our intangibles and then amortizing them over anything from 5 to 12 years. So there's a huge non-cash item that flows through the income statement, and we think adjusted EBITDA gives a much better measure of the true cash flow and the performance of the business. So we've been tracking anything from 2% to 27% adjusted EBITDA. Our target we want to get to, when we think we've got synergies from all our operations, we really want to be operating between 20 and 40% adjusted EBITDA. And we think also the adjusted EBITDA, as I said, mirrors cash flow for the most part, other than the one-time cost from acquisitions. ACV, for us, a really big metric. We've ended up the year, at the end of last year, with 14.8 million in ACV. The Q4 number was, we grew organically by $1.3 million. The prior quarter, we grew by 5.5 million, by 6 million, of which 540K was organic. So just in year 2020, we went from 7.4 million to 14.8 million, 100% growth, and of that 25% was organic and 75% through acquisitions. Our cap table. We currently have about 36.1 million shares outstanding, 2.2 million options, which could bring in another $4.2 million, an average price of about $192. We've also got 1.3 million warrants, which have an average price of $3.57, which can bring in another 4.5 million. At the time this was done, we were trading at 311. We're probably not that far off now, but it's a market cap then of 112 million, with $27 million of cash on hand and no debt. That, you know, we're trading at probably, if you look at, we're going into the year, at about $22 million of revenue. We're trading at under 4 times revenue, which was pretty modest compared to some of our the comps out there. And we're, you know, pure SaaS business with high margins. Management controls about 27% of the company, and the balance is in the public float. And of that public float, the majority of that is probably held by institutions. We closed two financings last year. In March, we did a 15.3 million bought deal at $1.80, and that was primarily institutions, and I think probably almost 100% institutions. Then in November, we did a deal at $17 million bought deal at $2.90, and that was probably about 75% institutions who purchased that offering. Just some comps, and this is, you can see, you know, we were trading at about 4 times revenue. The Canadian average comps about almost 5 times revenue, and the US comps are trading at about 16 times revenue. One of the things to note is if you look at the comps, the Canadian comps, there are very few pure software plays. Most of them have other assets which are sort of intermingled with their software. I believe our margins are probably higher than anyone's, and we're generating cash from operations. We're currently covered by 5 analysts. We've got 8 Capital, Beacon, Cormark, Paradigm, and Canaccord. They all have buy ratings with the targets of between $4 and $5. Dan talked about Nova Scotia. This is a deal which we won organically. It can get us up to $2.5 million of recurring revenue. We're only recognizing close to 500,000 of that at this point, and we believe that there's huge opportunity to get the addition up to that $2.5 million within the next year and a half. Our offshore development team, prized asset, as Dan said, Vijit Kumara, one of our principals, founded this team. His parents are from Sri Lanka. He went down there, set up a team, and then came back to Canada in 2015. I think we're up to about 50 people in that team at present. Dan, if you want to just go through the update.
Yeah, just to summarize, it's a large marketplace, and we got a great history of acquisition. It's actually 9 acquisitions with the one we just announced early this week. Lots of recurring SaaS-based revenue, well above the 70% market team. We got a team that's done it before. We're internationally based. We got a low-cost R&D hub, and we think we crossed all the stuff. We've been growing very nicely organically. We added, Q3, we added about $500,000 of contract value recurring. Q4, we added over 1.3 million of contract value, and we still see that strong growth within our patient flow operational visibility of continuously adding some recurring revenue over the next few quarters here. So we're excited.
Dan and Brian, thank you very much for walking us through your pitch deck and giving us a high-level overview of the business. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Who are your customers? And I mean that, you sell to the hospitals. Are you selling, you sold to Nova Scotia, you've sold to some hospitals, you sell to regions. Who makes those buying decisions?
Yeah, healthcare. So number one is both our M&A and our growth is primarily focused on a government-funded based healthcare system. So UK and Canada are government-funded. Lots of Europe is government-funded. Australia, where we got a base of customer now, is government-funded. So in those areas, decisions are actually not always made in the same way, and depending on the products, right? So government funds hospitals, they regulate hospitals, and they regulate healthcare facilities. So healthcare facilities do have budget to buy their own software. So some of those solutions would be bought by the hospitals. In the UK, they would call them trusts. But other times government would oversee those areas. So something like Transforming System, which is the Sri product, would be sold to government entities that would oversee groups of hospitals or community agencies or things where they would want to see data across those areas. So the ecosystem is connecting all the time within healthcare, within government and hospitals, and how they communicate with each other. And vendors provide solutions that help them communicate more effectively and help the patients communicate more effectively with all of their healthcare providers more effectively. And we provide tools for that. So it's not a clean-cut answer, but those would be who all our customers are. We've sold to all of the above.
And when you're making a sale, I guess you probably have to get buy-in at the hospital level and at sort of the government level for a lot of this. So I'm guessing it's a fairly kind of complex sales cycle.
Yeah, there's complexity to the sales cycle. Anytime you're selling to government and larger transactions, there's complexity to sales cycles. But again, we think it's a competitive advantage through growing through M&A. These companies have been around for a while. A lot of them, they all have track records of being able to sell, and they've all been building a good base. So it starts in these particular markets, they tend to buy what the neighbor buys or bleed sales, or they tend to, to pile on into those things. So one of the good things about it is when you get into one area of government, you get into another area of government and things grow. So that's sort of been a lot of the approach that's been happened here.
And when you're getting sales, is it organic sales in the sense, or like greenfield sales, where they don't have a solution and the IT and the healthcare system is evolving so rapidly? Or are you kicking out a competitor and then grabbing market share that way?
I would say in the pace of operational visibility space, it's green space. It's newer solutions that are coming in. All that stuff is new and improvements. The TREAT product in the community agency, we are into what I'll call second generation, where they've taken first generation electronic health records, lighter weight things, and now regions or groups or larger entities are getting together to communicate more on a streamlined. So Nova Scotia, we've replaced a lot of different software there for that thing. They wanted to reinvigorate their entire process, so they decided to get a provincial-wide solution. We're starting to see those trends as the next generation of those platforms for sure.
And okay, with the technology, it's SaaS, or 75-ish% of your business is SaaS, and is that all cloud-based solutions? And
yeah, not all of them. I'm going to say, you know, our contract value, you know, is definitely getting into like the $15-16 million range here of contract value, which we would call software solutions, which give us recurring revenue. The majority of those would be cloud-based solutions. There is some older on-premise that still are out there, probably 20-30% of our base, but most of it is annual recurring SaaS-based, hosted-based environments.
Okay, and switching over to your M&A strategy, how much technology or integration do you guys do when you buy a new system? Are you essentially buying market share in a region and then you roll out new services to that with your others, or are you running kind of concurrent different systems based on the different regions you're in?
We don't. We have integrated technologies in the field, there, and we continue to do that as customers have that, and that's a normal process in healthcare to be doing. They tend to buy different components, and there's a lot of standardization. There's things called HL7 that would move the patient around from various systems, and patient identifiers move around within those systems. So we're all compliant with all of those integration-based stuff. So we would integrate with our stuff the same way we would integrate with other systems that are there. We have taken piecemeal effects where we have taken modules from one product and a customer has a requirement, and we would bid a combination of different products, and then we would work to integrate it, and then we'd have that again to sell as an integrated solution. We're not out of our way to build one, scrap something and build one super system here. That's not what we're about. It depends on the characteristics of what's going on there, and we look at it from that perspective.
Okay, but is there a sort of a merging of the technology or the product paths into sort of more of a...
There's a merging of a messaging process and filling gaps with different solutions, and we would integrate in the field. So we do have technological answers and would work with that, but we're not working. We are cross-selling into our base is an important part of our growth, although we look for entire greenfield. So we do know government healthcare is difficult to sell into, and if you're in a particular account and you're doing good account management, you can grow the footprint in that account. And we got lots of evidence of continuous work in a lot of these accounts where we can continue to add more systems. And the more systems we acquire that are synergistic, the more that will happen.
And how different are the Canadians? Like, you have a lot of leverage from technology developed in Canada, then apply it to Europe or Australia or somewhere else, or given their various regulatory environments or needs, you have to kind of modify that.
Some systems are better for some geographical jurisdictions than others, but in general, we think we can move systems, especially in the patient flow operational visibility space, from geography to geography, and we already are producing evidence of being able to do that.
Okay, and do you have any metrics or anything to talk about how you're like sort of often in the SaaS space, you use a sort of land and expand. You get one product in there and you add modules. How much sort of organic, that type of growth do you have?
We're, I think if you go back in the slide, you can see in the target marketplace, we're at about a $700 per bed mark would be total. If you take the amount of facilities, it's $700 per bed times, I think it was, I can't remember the amount of beds that were in there. It was like 300,000 beds. That would be our target marketplace. We have about 50,000 beds under contract out of 700, which would be our target, which would be our target marketplace we're only in about 20% of that, 15-20% of the ability. So land and expand is still a big part of what the opportunity is here.
Sorry, just to clarify that number, you're currently providing services to hospitals or healthcare systems that have 50,000 beds under their
That's right. In total, that would be that. And if you take all of our systems combined, it'd be about 700 per bed per facility would be the target marketplace, which we're about 15% of.
Okay. And so basically all the hospital beds in the UK, Canada, Australia, and I forget your other, that's about
all those European market would be our target markets, right?
Yeah.
We've predominantly been selling in Canada and the UK. We do have implementations in Qatar in the Mideast. We got implementations in Europe. We have implementations in Australia. Australia is a key market for us to expand into. It's very similar to the UK and the Canadian marketplace. So we do have, with the last acquisition we just did, we got about 8 or 9 implementations going on in various systems in Australia as well. So Australia is an area that was greenfield for us to grow into.
And can you talk about your success in just kicking out the incumbent players and gaining new market share from gaining market share?
I don't know if there's incumbents because we're not really replacing on the patient flow operational visibility space. It's mostly greenfield. We do have success in incumbents with the TREAT product, which is the Canadian electronic health record in the mental health space for it. But, competitively, we believe the Transforming and the InTouch products and the Oculus products are the leaders in its field within their geographies. So there are competitive products in those markets. But, we just, InTouch, we just took out one of our competitors. So there's not much competition with a company called JX, which we just bought this week. Their business in that space. We just took that competitor out. 57 customers that have the JX solution in there that we can grow InTouch solutions into. So again, more land and expand, which is a part of our strategy to go through. So we believe we're the leader. We're winning competitive RFPs. There's been very minimal losses that I've seen in the space, and we continue to grow.
When you sign on a new client, how hard is the integration? Like in the corporate world, ERP implementations have a history of being more expensive and more complicated. And is it a relatively being cloud-based solution? People just fire up a browser and you input some, like how complex and how long does the implementation process take?
The community mental health space would have, you get more of a change management based process in that. It's a little bit more complex on that base stuff for those larger scale implementations. But the patient flow stuff is pretty cookie cutter, cloud-based installed. There's some change management training. It is government. So you are going to be running a 2-month to a 5-month implementation methodology that we charge for that, but you are going to run through some of that.
Okay. You mentioned your competitors, all those Canadian and US IT health competitors. A lot of them are like electronic medical records. Very few of them are really sort of like comparable companies. They all have a different kind of flavor to them. Can you sort of on a high level talk about, let's say, how are you different from the services offered by Well Health or by TELUS or by...
So number one is we don't see any of those guys in the UK marketplace, which is a big part of our growth. So Well Health is physician market. They have some EHR in the physician market, but they have nothing in the community agency mental health space. So we don't view them as a competitor in any of their solutions. TELUS has no solutions. Again, their electronic health record in the physician market, nothing in the community mental health station, nothing in the patient flow-based arena. Well Health has nothing in the patient flow-based arena. All our competitors in Canada would be US-based vendors that sort of come up here a little bit, but not very much in the patient flow-based arena to do it. So we don't see competitive-based landscapes from any of those. There's no one that's public is competitive. Most of the ones that are public are sort of like these hybrid software / clinics, which are really interesting, confusing to me, but in terms of how they work, but they're not pure software. I like to compare ourselves to technology. We're a pure technology company. It's all about software, recurring revenue. We're not selling information or journals or publications or training material or consulting services or professional services. It's software, recurring, high margin business. That's why we're doing it. And that's why we've moved international. We don't think the landscape for M&A is big enough in Canada, or the competitive landscape is big enough to get the growth that the public investors need. So we want to stick 100% to software, and that's what we do.
And do you, like on the implementation side, do you guys do all that yourself, or do you work with any either sort of sales, distribution, or implementation partners to help give you scale?
We have a handful of partners in Europe and Australia that that sell and implement some of our solutions. Canada, we're doing everything on our own at this stage, although we are working on some partnerships. But in the most part, we would do most of the training and implementation ourselves.
Okay.
We have our own groups. There's about 160 people in the company. 60 of those would be in our innovation lab in Colombo, Sri Lanka. A chunk of those would be implementation teams.
All right. And now, and to your M&A strategy, you're buying technology as well as market share or a footprint within a geographic market. Are those sort of the main things you're buying?
We're buying strategic acquisitions that would fit within those silos of patient flow operational visibility and community mental health agency.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff we've done the last few years have been in the patient flow operational visibility based the patient journey based solutions. We are buying gaps in our solutions, so gaps that we need to get filled. We're buying market share of customers, and we're buying footprints in geographies that we may be able to bring our other solutions into. So all of the above are important as part of our M&A based strategy.
You talked about your acquisitions are 1 to 2.5 times revenue. Are these typically profitable companies, or they're not big companies, they're not huge companies you're buying? Or are they like, what is there on an EBITDA basis, or like, are you buying a lot of profits through them?
Some of them we're buying profits. It depends on what it is. Most of them tend to be, break-even based, owner-operated based business. So, if there's any profits, the owners were taking them. They weren't retaining them. But we look at them for what we can do with them. So is there cost reductions that we can do with our Colombo base, which would get them instantaneously profitable, or what can we do? So we're not interested in buying losing businesses, at least at this stage. Maybe we will if there's really big growth potential to do it. But we are a very numbers-driven based company. We want to produce that 20% adjusted EBITDA and above based stuff. So we're looking for, if they're not profitable, we'll make them profitable very quickly through restructuring and so forth to get them to the point where they need to be.
And what does the integration process with your M&A looks like?
Yeah, we had a pretty experienced M&A integration. We have a very robust methodology that we use where we look at the companies, we put them all in our systems, all in the same accounting systems, all in the same emails, all in the same help desk systems, all in the same development systems to control development, and same HR systems, etc. So we put all the companies on the same systems and we integrate them all into that. They do run somewhat independently from a development perspective or stuff, but we still, silos. Different sales reps will sell different solutions. They won't sell them all. They'll sell groupings of them, and we go through those particular roles to do that. Depends on the company. Some of them will run more independent than others, but it just depends on where we sit at that particular time.
All right. You've talked about you buy with a combination of cash and stock. And you mentioned that lately you've been doing more on a cash basis. What's the, like, are the sellers, like you said, they're owner operated, are they looking to exit? Do they join the company and sort of help out, or what's, can you talk about like sort of the motivation? And
we've had different owners have different motivations, depends. A lot of them have stayed with us. Some have exited and just wanted the cash, or parts of the owners have exited and parts have stayed, depending on how the ownership structure is. And we're open to all suggestions, depending on what the business is open to, right? So we always like to use some stock, even if the owner wants to exit the business, because we still want to maintain a relationship with those owners. We always escrow the stock over a 3-year period when they take it, and we're not afraid to use the currency. We will use some elements of it. But it all depends on the motives. We like to highlight to some of the earlier, some of the guys that took cash, that if they would have took stock, how well they would have done so far. But we'd like to think our stock is going to continue to grow, and we encourage them to take a portion of it to help grow with us. That being said, we're also cognizant of the dilution that comes with that as well. So we are using cash. We are on the verge of using credit as well, because we think our numbers justify that. And we can carry the debt with the cash that we're generating. So all that is in play with us.
Okay. On the client side again, on the contract length, how long are your typical contracts with the hospitals or the regions?
Your typical 3 to 6 year contracts,
okay.
are there. You guys still got older contracts which are year to year because they're maintenance contracts. But we do like to stress that we do sell to large government-based agencies where change management is a difficult process. So we tend to think our solutions are pretty sticky.
Okay. And do you have any metrics on like your loss rate or your win rate?
Yeah, we're at about 3% churn, I think.
Okay.
Like that.
Are there any other markets that you're looking to expand into?
Europe
in terms of geographic markets.
Yeah, UK is a great launch pad to get into Mideast, and we already have implementations in the Mideast, and we got other areas interested in the Mideast, so we do run Mideast from there. As I mentioned before, Australia with the JX acquisitions gives us more. We like Australia. We think there's opportunities as we scour the landscape for the solutions that we have, because we're not seeing them there predominantly with other vendors. So we do like that space to grow into, and we are looking all through Europe for acquisitions for sure.
How has the Brexit? How did that affect you? Did that sort of screw up your launch pad from the UK into the rest of Europe, or?
I don't think so. We'll just set up entities. We haven't seen anything yet. COVID's sort of been in the middle of all this, but we haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah. And if, like, in terms of are you giving any guidance on your growth rate or any kind of parameters on what sort of, what's going to limit or drive the growth in terms of what rates?
We haven't put any official guidance that's there. We just asked the investor to look what we've done in the last few quarters, and we stress that we see that trend continuing. So it's not a blip in terms of what we've been doing, but we've added in the last 2 quarters almost $2 million worth of recurring, so $1 million a quarter type of recurring per quarter. Will we sustain that? Time will tell. It's still early days that we've had it's still early days since we've had the transforming the InTouch stuff in our operations. We've only had them since Q3. But so far they seem to be producing, and others on a regular basis, that we feel we're going to be able to sustain somewhat of those levels. Maybe not as high as those levels, but somewhat of those levels. And if you look comparative to other SaaS-based companies in the Canadian markets that are stressing themselves as growth-based SaaS companies, we're beating them pretty nicely. Some of these companies in terms of organic-based growth, and we don't think the investors are recognizing that to the degree that we have, but we've added some pretty significant organic growth based on in the business. So if you think organic software growth is giving you 75% gross margin, and we're adding $1 million a quarter to that into what we have, that should start hitting the bottom line. And we ask the investors to keep watching that.
If you had, let's say, an infusion of cash or like to drive growth, what would you, you could drive growth by doing more acquisitions, or is it investing more in sales and marketing or R&D product development? What would drive growth?
We're sitting on about $25 million of cash still, Martin, right? From our capital raises. So we are not putting that to work. We have no interest of going into losses to get growth. What we are looking at is a synergistic M&A and allowing the recurring revenue stream to bring profits to the bottom line, but we think there's even more surplus in those margins to generate more investment internally to put into growth-based sales and marketing efforts. So as we get more organic growth, we'll earmark some of those gross margin to the investor, but we're also earmarking a bunch of that gross margin to growth into the sales and marketing efforts of those products that we think that warrant it.
Okay. Okay. So, and your general is your cash flow strategy kind of run a slight profitability on a cash flow adjusted EBITDA basis?
Yeah, we like
and
to think
just to drive any excess cash flow into growth, or are you trying to push up the margins here?
We want to be above 20 to 30% margin in the business, and we think we can accomplish that and still reinvest a portion on top of that at some point into either carrying debt for more acquisitions or investing more into the growth-based parts of our business, and we'll see that as we continue to go into that. But we're not going to be that organization that's going to be losing 20, 30% and just saying, hey, we're investing in growth. That's not what we're about. We're doing this, we're doing this to continue the bottom line, and we still think we can do both.
If I remember from one of your slides back where you had your EBITDA quarter over quarter, it seemed fairly volatile. You had some very strong quarters and some not so strong quarters. Is that driven by like M&A integration costs?
Yeah, mostly M&A, and you really got to take a snapshot of the company with the last two acquisitions in Q3 and Q4, because that's really where the materiality would come into the equation. With it, where we feel we just started hitting critical mass with those two acquisitions. A lot of the initial acquisitions, any surplus that we made, were taken up through public costs and general G&A and infrastructure costs. So the first few years were spent investing in those base structures and getting that all in place on an ongoing operational baseability, but that's pretty stable right now. And as we make acquisitions, the EBITDA comes to the bottom line because we got infrastructure in place. So we just keep investing in that. But I do think if you look at the last two quarters, you'll see good adjusted EBITDA based margins. Adjusted EBITDA is the proper number we feel to look at for us because we're an acquisition company. We have a lot of goodwill and amortization on our balance sheet that gets depreciated or rolled out over a quarter basis. So you take those non-cash things out of the equation, is really maps cash flow a little bit more accurately than other metrics for us. So we do think it is an appropriate metric for us.
Given your size now, and you mentioned you could strap on some debt comfortably, given your scale, you've got $25 million in your jeans. Your currency and your stock has much improved over the last year. It looks like you're kind of set up. You have the potential of doing quite a much more substantial kind of acquisition in the coming time. Is that a potential, or is it having more bullets for a bunch of smaller ones?
The landscape in our space is still, because we're dealing in government-funded country by country type of areas. And Canada sees this as well, and I always talk to other people about that. And an M&A strategy buying healthcare IT companies in Canada is very difficult to do because of the size of the companies. The reason the companies are small because of the size of the market, and the market's even more fragmented, right? So it is a trend to see $2-3 million a year companies, right? Now when you get a $2-3 million a year company in the UK, it's actually a $4-6 million company because of the pound. So the currency is nice to get, and the margins get nicer to get within those marketplaces. But we do want to put this money to work, and we do know that somewhere in here we are going to need to make a transformational type of acquisition, but we want to get to a little bit more of a critical size before we do that. So ideally we want to get to a $30+ million, $35 million company with like $25 million of EBIT recurring. We think our trajectory of what we're doing organically, as well as the cash for acquisitions, has that pretty. It's in our radar pretty closely, right? So when we get to that mark, the next phase, in my view, would be to start looking a little bit more on a transformational based type of acquisition to get it to the next level. But again, the opportunity has to be there. It has to be the right company. It has to be the right characteristics. So you just never know. But we're thinking on the same lines as you would mention it.
All right. And I think my final question here, you're in government controlled or healthcare systems. Is there any opportunity for you in the US, or is that just a different beast for you guys?
I wouldn't say never. We're not looking actively for acquisitions there. It has its own infrastructure, its own ecosystem. It's venture capital funded based companies because the market would justify VC to going into those markets, so they do. And that drives a different market cap and valuation in different world. We do have some implementations of our system, so we do sell a little bit in there of some of our stuff and continue to do that. But we do think we also know that the US ones don't go into Europe. So that's not what they do. So we have less competition and acquisition, and it's a different world. They don't really understand that healthcare vertical, and their systems don't match to it as effectively as we do. So they don't go there that much as we do. So that's why we think we have a niche of going into this government-funded based worlds.
All right. Okay. I can't really think, I don't have any more questions at this point. Are there any points you want to highlight or any to just wrap things up here?
I think we've meandered through, but we've gotten hit our all the predominant points. We are growing organically with some solutions. They're pretty innovative. They're solving some problems that became very evident with COVID in terms of we can't get patients into the hospital and we need to control the beds and the crowdedness of hospitals. So our solutions have come a little bit to the top. We expect that trend to continue, and we expect to continue to see growth in there. We're dealing in a large market. We think there's three ways we think investors can make money here, or three things that we think of every day. So one is we buy acquisitions, and we do a good job on the albatross. So if we're buying things at 2.5 times and we're trading at 5 times, we're not trading at 5 times yet, but even at 4 times, you're making the albatross in the acquisitions. Every time we make an acquisition, there's there. Every time we make an acquisition, our recurring revenue goes up. We're also selling organically. So every time we sell organically with 70-75% margin, that's either going to the bottom line or it's giving us more investment capital to develop more sales and marketing to keep growing more organically. So there's money to be made there for every time we make a deal. And lastly, R&D costs are getting enormous, especially in this frothy venture capitalist high-tech world where technology people are expensive, and we think we have a pretty effective innovation lab in our offshore development group that we own that gives us some value in terms of being able to increase profitability. So all three of those are the way we drive our business every day, and it's how we think. And we ask the investor to keep following us and keep moving along with us. So we think we're doing it the right way.
All right. Dan, Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us. That's very good. A lot of great information there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.